a graduate of Yale, Columbia, and Stanford universities, and she conducts research on the impact of breathing, yoga, and meditation on health and well-being. Please join me to welcome Dr. Emma Seppala.
Thank you so much. I think the microphone's working, right? Yeah, okay. It's an honor to be here. I was so pleased when Carol invited me because it was just an incredible experience to teach with her and Fred. And it's amazing to see how much this program has grown on the campus and how much is happening here with regards to happiness and well-being. So following on what Rick was just talking about when he talked about the human brain, he mentioned, right, that the human brain is characterized by that sense of connection and us, which is going to tie right into what I'm going to talk about, which is a little bit more about how belongingness and service connect to happiness. So I'll start with a quote, which is a lengthy quote, but a really nice one by Einstein. A human being is part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. We experience ourselves, our thoughts and feelings, as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion, to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature and its beauty. And what I'll argue, showing some scientific evidence for this, is that actually this is our true nature, and this is the nature of happiness, is that sense of connection to others. So I'll start by talking about the opposite of that, which is loneliness. So I'll just ask you a question. In 1996, there was a survey done nationwide asking people, how many people in your life do you feel close or connected to, so much so that you would share your personal problems with them? What do you think the modal number was, which is, everyone knows what a modal number is, right? The most amount of people answered, what? In 1996, it was 3, okay? And in 2004, they did it again. What was it then? 1, with 25% of Americans saying 0. Wow. 1 in 4 people that we meet in the street don't feel that connection with anyone. I always think that always makes it worth it to smile at someone. Always. There's never an excuse, right? It might be the first smile they got that day. But let's talk a little bit about loneliness and its impact on physical and mental health. So it's linked to a number of health outcomes, including anxiety, depression, suicide. I'll talk a little bit about this later, but I'm doing work, especially with returning veterans. How many people have heard about the issues that returning veterans are dealing with? There's a lot of suicide, right? And it's very much tied into this feeling of disconnect and loneliness. And loneliness has health risks comparable to, get this, smoking, blood pressure, and obesity. So you can go to the gym and do all these beautiful things for yourself, but that feeling of connection is so important. And also antisocial behaviors, so a lot of violent behaviors that we've heard about or read about on college campuses or high schools were often conducted by individuals who are very disconnected. Now let's talk about the good news. Belongingness and connectedness has been called a fundamental human need. So even if you raise someone with giving them food, shelter, warmth, but you don't give them the loving care, you don't give them a sense of connection from a loved one, they won't grow up to be able to function as a normal human being. And it's been linked to psychological well-being, decreased stress, increased happiness, and in terms of physical health, improved immune function. So Sheldon Cohen, as a psychologist, did a really interesting research study where he had participants, college students, come in at the beginning of the semester, and he infected them all with the flu by inserting bacteria up their nose, and saw who gets sick and how many connections do they have with others. Interesting study, right? So he found that those who felt more belongingness and connection actually got sick less, and if they did get sick, was less. They didn't get sick as badly as others. Connection also leads to quicker recovery from diseases and an increased lifespan. So what is a healthy sense of belonging and connectedness, and where can I get one, right? Well, it's not linked to the amount of friends you have on Facebook. That's the good news. Did anybody read that? There was a lot of articles out on this last week. One of my colleagues here in the psychology department was highlighted in the news for research. He showed that a lot of people who actually think that others are having so much more of a great time, a great life, they look so beautiful, and they're all going to parties every night, and how when we look on Facebook, it can actually make us feel more down about our own selves. So that's just something good to know in case that happens again next time. Don't believe yourself. Very interestingly, it's linked to, so the benefits of belongingness are not linked to how many friends you have, because you've all heard the expression of loneliness in a crowd, but it's linked to your subjective or perceived sense of connection to others. It's fully an internal state. So you might just have one friend, or you might have no friends, but you feel connected to everyone, you get the benefits thereof, which is very beautiful because that means you can actually have an impact on it yourself. We'll talk about it a little bit more. So this is how I'll define social connectedness. A subjective feeling of closeness and positive regard for others in one's general social environment. And how can we develop it? I only have very little time, so I'm going to go kind of quickly. If I'm talking too fast, you'll have to let me know. So here, I'll just start with another beautiful quote. This is by a Bengali poet. I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. So I love Bertrand Russell's quote that we just read, that if you're happy, you'll naturally be good, but I also do think that if you're good, perhaps you will be happy. Let's talk a little bit about service. So one thing about, Rick was saying, that in our natural state we are good, and research done with small infants and chimpanzees, just these kids are too small to have learned from someone else that they should help others. There's research being done at the Max Planck Institute where they naturally will help. So it's a really fun research study. They have kids come in, and the experimenter will just drop a pen and be like, oh, the pen. And then you'll see these little kids just running up and giving him the pen. And the same thing with chimpanzees. And it's just very sweet. And just indicative that, wow, what is our natural state when we're tiny little creatures even? Already we want to help others. And Dale Miller here, 5 minutes, okay. Dale Miller here at the business school has done similar research with adults and shown that as adults, we also naturally want to help others, but we actually will stop ourselves because we're worried about what other people will think. So we're actually in the same boat. Have you ever had that where you're like, you want to help someone, but you're like, oh man, I don't know what they're going to think, or I don't know if they'll think I'm self-interested. Next time that happens, just drop that thought, go and help that person for sure. Real quick here about mirror neurons. Anybody heard about mirror neurons? This is just another really interesting line of research that just shows how connected we are with others. So mirror neurons are activated when we see someone else do something. So let's say I see someone else smiling at me. Internally, that's making me smile. If I see someone pick up an object, it's as if I'm doing it myself. Why is this important? First of all, it's the basis for empathy and compassion. When we see someone else suffering, it makes us suffer in some way, drawing us to want to help others. More importantly, going back to that person, that idea of smiling at someone. You know, have you ever walked down the street or down a hall and you smile at someone, maybe you think you know them or something, and they don't smile back? How many people have had that? You're like, ooh, you're like, but I always think no matter what, if they smile or they don't smile back, you have activated their zygomatic muscles, which are these little smile muscles right here, and internally they've smiled, and who knows, they'll probably be smiling at the next person that they see. And research has shown that just activating those muscles makes people feel happier and better. And similarly, this here's a nice little smile for you. But, when someone walks into the room and they're feeling really stressed or angry, have you ever had that someone walks in and all of a sudden you're stressed or angry, right? Immediately, you're on fire, you want to... But the same way is the other way, as Rick was also saying. Like, when we're in our natural state, it just takes a single flower to perfume a whole room. So you just being in that state of happiness, well-being, will impact all those around you, which is why also, to what Rick was saying, that actually being happy and taking care of yourself is probably the best thing you can do for everyone else around you. So if you don't do it for yourself, do it for others. Just real quick, I know I have very little time, far less time than I hope, but there's research showing that helping others benefits health and longevity more so even than being helped. So this was a study done by Stephanie Brown at the University of Michigan, and she showed that in elderly people that those helping others was more predictive of health than being helped themselves, even controlling for other factors that were going on. Another I'm going very quickly here. 2 minutes left. Okay, so there was a really interesting study also where participants got to come in and they were given, I think, I don't remember how much it was, $10 or $20. Here, you have to go spend this on something for yourself, or the other group was given the money and they had to go and spend it on someone else. Who was happier at the end of the day? Those who gave it to others, right? Interesting thought, because if you think about the messages we get in society, it's all about buy stuff for yourself, think of yourself, but actually it's in giving to others that we feel happier. And another study that was looked at charitable donations. While people were in the brain scanner, it either said, okay, you received this money, or your money was just donated to, so forth. It also activated the same amount of pleasure. So that giving also really helps. Giving is maybe as pleasurable, if not more so, than receiving. I don't know if you can see this slide very well. There's a really interesting sociology lab at Harvard that has showed that when one person acts in a way that's pro-social, it impacts all those around them in concentric circles. So this little person in the middle, they were doing, they were called economics games, where you're either acting fairly or unfairly, you're giving money or you're not giving money to someone, and notice that, wow, when one person's pro-social, it impacts those people around them, who in turn go on to impact others. Concentric circles, just a really beautiful notion in terms of thinking about the potential that we have in this as this human community of ours. How am I doing for time? 40 seconds, gosh. Okay. All right. This is probably one of my favorite topics to talk about then, is that this was conducted by Jonathan Haidt at the University of Virginia. He showed that, when you're going to help someone, let's say you walk down the street and you're helping someone pick up their groceries. An elderly lady dropped her groceries. You go and help that person. You're helping that person. How do you feel? Awesome, right? And then people who watch you, how do they feel? He calls it a state of elevation. They feel elevated just watching that. Have you ever had that where you've seen like a father and there's a baby or someone else and you get tears in your eyes because it's so beautiful to see that? Has anybody had that? Yeah, it happens all the time, right? And so the idea that it spreads to all those around you and that those people who feel elevated are more likely to also go out and help others. So I love this line of research. It's so inspiring. Okay, I'm not going to keep talking now, but what did I want to leave you with? That no matter what, go out and spread your smile and be of service. And I think that Kelly is now going to be talking about some practices that you can do for self-compassion, which are going to lead you to be able to fill your cup, as Rick was mentioning before. Thank you.
So one thing that's important for health and well-being is getting oxygen to our brains and moving our bodies around a little bit. So before we get to our next speaker, if you can, please, I invite you to stand up, and we're going to just stretch around a little bit, get some air to our bodies. You can move your neck around, stretch out your arms.
Oops, sorry. Excellent idea. Thank you very much. Testing.
All right, and now after you feel a little stretched out and a little more relaxed, please sit. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kelly McGonigal. She's a health psychologist here at Stanford, and she's a leading expert on the mind-body relationship. She currently teaches for the School of Medicine's Improvement Program, as well as a senior teacher at Stanford's Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kelly McGonigal.
Thank you. Hello. So as Dr. Seppala just told you about, the ability to feel compassion for others is part of our human nature. And yet many people find that when it's time to turn that compassion onto themselves, it is much more difficult. Have you had this experience? Yeah. So it's my hope today to give you a little bit of motivation to want to train and develop that capacity to extend compassion to yourself. And then later this afternoon, if you come to the workshop, we'll do some in-depth practices in cultivating self-compassion. So I want to start by showing you a very unusual happiness intervention. Now, Dr. Luskin told us earlier this morning that if you want to create happiness, focusing on misery is not the way to do it. And yet, I want to tell you about a study where the happiness intervention was explicitly, think about the worst thing that happened to you today. At the end of the day, you're just going to sit, you're going to think about it, even write about it for 5 to 15 minutes. And even though that shouldn't make people happy, the data suggests that it significantly reduces depression and increases happiness. And people only needed to do this for 1 week. It was just that first week where they were thinking about the worst thing that happened to them each day at the end of the day. And the effect was long-lasting and cumulative. So something that they were doing while they were focusing on the worst thing that happened to them somehow taught them a skill that was helpful in reducing depression, reducing their own suffering, and increasing happiness. And it turns out that there's more than one way to think about your own suffering. There's a way that leads to more misery, and there's a way that actually leads to less suffering and greater happiness. And what you're looking at here are some slides from a recent study by Dr. Paul Gilbert, who's a major self-compassion researcher, as well as his colleagues, looking at what happens in the brain when you think about or imagine something really terrible happening to you. For example, receiving a 3rd job rejection in a row. And in this study, they asked people to think about distressing events like rejection in one of 2 ways. And so the first way was to think about it in the way that we typically think about distressing situations, to take a very self-critical and harsh approach. You've probably done this yourself. So for the example of receiving another job rejection, it might be something like, I'm never going to get a job, what's wrong with me, I don't have what it takes, that kind of self-beating that we engage in. It's all my fault, I should have been better at the interview. When we engage in self-reflection in this way, in this self-critical and harsh way, it activates the regions of the brain that are associated with defense, threat, self-inhibition, and self-judgment, what Dr. Hansen would refer to as that reactive mode. And yet, if you think about the exact same situation in a more self-nurturing way, where you might say to yourself something like, boy, I can see how upset you are. You really wanted that job. This is difficult to receive so many rejections, especially when you put so much time into this. And you really want to be of some service in the world and to get a job. When you just think about the situation in that more self-soothing or self-understanding way, it puts you in what Dr. Hansen talked about as the responsive mode of the brain. It's a totally different experience for the brain, and it's a totally different experience for your body and for yourself. And just to get a sense of what you're looking at in these brain regions here, these are axial views. So if you imagine someone taking an axe, cutting my head in half, removing the top of my head, and then you're going to peer down and see what's happening. You can see in this first image some of the most activated areas when we're thinking self-critically are areas of the brain that are associated with self-inhibition, controlling yourself, as well as some areas you can't see on this slide that are associated with punishment and self-punishment. In the bottom slide, what you're looking at here is that same axial view, as well as a side view. And these are regions associated with compassion and understanding what's happening in the body, including the insula, which you've heard about in a few different talks. And so when we think about something that makes us very unhappy, but we do it in a way that is self-understanding and self-compassionate, we're actually activating that responsive mode and that mode that allows us to feel connected to ourselves and to others. And in fact, that intervention that I talked about, the happiness intervention, it was specifically asking people to think about and write about that worst thing that happened in the course of the day from a self-compassionate point of view. And they were asked at the end of every day to write themselves a letter about the upsetting situation, thinking about what you would say to a friend in your position, or what a dear friend would say to you, and to try to have a sense of understanding and empathy for your own distress. And make sure that the letter provides you with whatever it is that you need to hear to feel nurtured and encouraged and motivated and cared for. And it was this intervention that led to those significant increases in happiness and decreases in depression as long as 6 months after people did this for just 1 week. And essentially what you can think of as this little self-compassion intervention, it was training the brain, it was rewiring the brain, as Dr. Hansen talked about, to be more likely to slide into that responsive mode as opposed to staying in that reactive, self-defensive, and self-critical mode. And as it turns out, you can tell a lot about someone's well-being and mental health by how self-compassionate they are. Multiple studies show that people who are more self-compassionate are in general happier, they're more optimistic, and they have greater social connection. And they also experience less anxiety, less depression, less self-criticism, and less unhealthy perfectionism. That is that sense that nothing you do is ever going to be good enough. It also protects against some of those mental traps that Dr. Luskin talked about, falling into social comparison. Am I as good as other people? Or what other people think about me? Social anxiety, anger, judgment, and closed-mindedness. And people who practice compassion with themselves find that spontaneously they are more able to relate to others in a way that includes forgiveness and connection and acceptance. And it's not just people who are naturally self-compassionate who show these benefits. You can learn to be more self-compassionate. And several studies are showing that when people take a brief self-compassion training, it improves mental health, reduces depression, and other positive benefits. Okay, so usually when I start to talk to people about self-compassion, people get very uneasy. And they'll even believe the research that it might make you happy, but they have a profound mistrust of what will happen if they let themselves off the hook. And many people fear that if they become self-compassionate, what that means is they're going to turn into a giant sloth who never wants to get off the couch, only wants to eat candy and play video games all day, will never get their work done, will never call their mom, will never do anything except whatever is most self-indulgent. Now, that's not actually what self-compassion is, and I'll show you some evidence in a moment. But a recent study, again, by Paul Gilbert, looked at how pervasive these fears are. And many people have fears like this, that if they develop a kind of kindness and acceptance towards themselves, they're going to completely fall apart and they'll never succeed at anything because they are so used to using anxiety, guilt, and shame as the primary motivator in their lives. So people may fear that they will lose their self-criticism and their flaws will show. People will see how messed up I really am if I'm not holding it all in together by beating myself up all the time. People fear that they will become weak, that their standards will drop, or perhaps another fear that if I actually think about my own suffering, I'm going to become so overwhelmed with sadness and grief that I won't be able to go on. They have a sense that maybe they won't be able to comfort themselves. And again, that is a skill that can be trained. And it turns out that this fear of compassion, of having compassion for yourself, is strongly correlated with a fear of having compassion for others and a lack of willingness to extend compassion to others. So you can see here that a study found that there was a positive correlation between agreeing with statements like, people will take advantage of me if I'm too compassionate, and these other fears about what will happen if I extend that compassion to myself. This is one of the reasons why in our compassion cultivation training program at the Stanford Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education, we spend a lot of time training self-compassion because it really is a foundation for being able to accept others, forgive others, and help others. Okay, so I want to disabuse you of this idea that if you cultivate self-compassion for yourself, you're going to become that couch potato. So here are a few recent studies. Students who are the highest in self-compassion are the least likely to procrastinate. Not the most likely to procrastinate, the least likely. And in fact, a separate study found that the more you beat yourself up for procrastinating studying on the first exam in a quarter, the longer you procrastinate on the next exam. And it's the forgiveness that predicts people who are able to not procrastinate on that second exam. So if you're the kind of person who's using guilt to try to motivate yourself to do better next time, you should know. Research suggests it doesn't work. Okay, self-compassion also predicts re-engagement from goals following a failure. Some of us fear that if we are kind to ourselves after we experience a setback or failure, that means that we're not going to be motivated to do anything else. But actually, it turns out when we're compassionate with ourselves, we're much more likely to get back on the horse and re-engage with a goal, as we're less afraid of future failure. Research also suggests that taking a self-compassionate point of view, so if you take people who maybe aren't always self-compassionate, but ask them to take a more compassionate point of view on a personal failure, they also then take more personal accountability for it. It is easier for them to see what their role was in it and how the whole thing happened. And that is really important for positive change and for learning and for achieving your goals. The willingness to see what role you had and how things maybe went wrong. Self-acceptance also predicts the willingness to receive and act on feedback. That is huge. Again, if you have the tendency to beat yourself up and to be your own worst critic, you really don't want to hear other people's point of view and their criticism because you already feel so miserable. But when you have a kind of safety zone and you can treat yourself with compassion and with forgiveness, it's much easier to hear other people's feedback, learn from it, and act on it. Self-compassion also has turned out to be a really good training for people who are trying to change very difficult behaviors, including smoking and binge eating. So one study found that developing self-compassion by cultivating a kind of compassionate voice in your own mind to talk to yourself through difficult situations, including cravings for cigarettes, that helped smokers quit. And another study found that just a one-day training in self-compassion helped obese binge eaters lose weight, and it was more successful than the standard dieting approach. And finally, self-compassion is associated with the joy of learning for its own sake. And I'm going to be very self-compassionate about the fact that there is a big typo in that sentence. Not a problem. And I think that this finding really points to what self-compassion is. That self-compassion is not letting ourselves off the hook and being self-indulgent. It's about choosing to use our own happiness and our own desire for meaning and connection with others as our primary motivation, as opposed to using guilt, shame, and fear as our primary motivation. And that when we are able to relate to ourselves in a more compassionate way, then we are able to approach the things in our life that give us happiness and meaning and hold ourselves accountable when we get in our own way. Okay, so I encourage you, if you're interested in learning these practices, if I've given you a sense of motivation to learn this, come to the workshop this afternoon and we'll do some of these practices, including the happiness intervention that I talked about at the beginning of this lecture. And I've also put up guided audio versions of all of the practices we'll be doing this afternoon for those of you who want to go to some of the other wonderful workshops. So if you want to write down this website, I'll have the slides of this talk, as well as lots of practices that you can begin to implement in your life to develop self-compassion. And enjoy the rest of your day. So are we going to panel now?
So Rick, Emma, Kelly, it was an amazing amount of information to absorb. And if any of the presenters are going to be willing to post their PowerPoints, here's what you need to do. We are going to be sending you an online evaluation, and you are going to fill it out. And after you hit send, the PowerPoint links are going to pop up. Ooh. Diabolical, right? So we're going to move now into our panel. When the panel is done, I'm just going to give you some orientation toward lunch. And we're going to begin right now. Fred Luskin is going to be moderating the panel with some questions. And Fred, you ready to go? Are we ready to go? We're not quite ready.
We need an extra mic. Is Emma's mic over here?
Do we not have the mic?
Is that an extra mic? How about right there? All right.
Well, hi again, everyone.
Yeah, Emma needs one.
I hope you've all gotten just a little sense of like the complexity and the simplicity of this field. of compassion and service and intricacy of brain patterning. As for me, and I think that for many of you, thinking about this more would probably do you some good. You know? No, like how do you be happier? And kind of put that on a menu of, you know, what are your goals during the day? But I'm just hosting a panel here, and what I would like, I'm just going to pose a few questions, and then maybe we'll take a couple questions from the audience. But the first thing that I would like to ask the three other speakers is, if you had to think of a simple, tangible practice that you could encourage college students to do, what might that be? You know, making it direct and approachable and, you know, just in whatever way. But certainly in our culture, it's a rare person who has a 45-minute period for meditation. But there are a lot of things that one can do during the day. And so I would just like to open it up and have some response along that line, knowing that a good percentage of our audience here are younger people.
Yeah, so maybe what I would suggest is lying down or sitting down, putting your hands on your belly, and taking a few deep belly breaths. Most of the traditions that teach these qualities we're talking about turn to the breath first as the vehicle for cultivating inner peace, connection with others, and well-being. So I would say lie down, sit down, take a few deep belly breaths.
You want to just demonstrate it?
Oh, yeah, let's do it now. Good idea.
Not everybody can lie down, but you can certainly...
Make yourself comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay. If you can scoot your hips all the way back in the chair if you want to lean back, that'll make a little more space in your belly. You'll feel that's a little bit better than letting your hips slide forward. Take the shoulders up to the ears if they're not already there. And exhale, drop them down. Good. Keep them there. Go ahead and bring one or both hands to your belly. And you can either close your eyes or perhaps just drop the gaze, because I won't do anything visually interesting. Okay, begin to notice the fact that you are already breathing. Notice that when you breathe in, there's some expansion that's happening. And for a few breaths, allow yourself to feel the expansion expanding as you breathe in. And feel the expansion dissolve as you breathe out. Allowing the breath to rise and fall with patience, but without any struggle to control the breath. Let the body be breathed. And you could rest in this state for quite a bit longer. In fact, we won't really know if you continue with this. But on your own, as you practice the simple belly breathing, I would say in the spaciousness of mind and body that you sense after doing that for a few breaths or a few minutes, bringing to mind someone that you love or something that you care about.
I was going to mention this in the talk, but I didn't have time to. So we spend a lot of time thinking about one person. Who's that? Ourselves, right? And there's research showing that the more self-focused, a lot of self-focus in the mind is linked with anxiety and depression, actually. Have you ever had a really bad, is this working or not? Have you ever had a really bad day and you just think everything's going terribly? And then you get a phone call from someone that you love who's doing really much worse than you. And you start to take care of them at that moment, right? What do you notice happens for yourself? You feel, how many people notice that they feel better, right, immediately? So sometimes it just takes an action to just move out of that space of self-focus and focus on someone else for the whole day to shift. So a little exercise, and Fred wants one. Why don't you go ahead and turn to someone you don't know next to you and say, don't just say, hey, I'm so-and-so. Just say something nice to them or something funny, whatever. Ready, set, go.
I'm so glad to finally meet you.
Thank you, me too.
And I really enjoyed your opening talk. And if you saw me typing it, I was taking notes.
No, I didn't. Thank you. It's very sweet. It's nice. I've been on this campus about almost 20 years. And let me turn this off.
Okay, let's come back.
99.
Let's come back.
Right now, it's
Let's
kind of
come
adjunct in a
back.
lot of different departments. I'm all over the place.
Yeah, I'm not even that. I have 2 appointments.
Okay, so how's everybody feeling? Give me a thumb barometer. Come on, let's raise our hands. Just give me the thumb barometer. How are you doing? Okay, good. How was that? Good?
Fun.
All right,
Thank
good.
That was great. I said to her, you have great energy. That was my comment. I'll do this quickly. The core practice I would suggest is many times a day, take in the good. The little goods of daily life. All those little tiny pearls that are strewn before us every day, and we normally just step right over, right? The fact that some good event has occurred, or there's a good condition around us, or we've gotten something done, or we've noticed something good in ourselves, or someone's been caring or kind or friendly to us. You know, just those little moments are opportunities to take in and really register a good experience. I'll talk in my workshop why that's so important. The short version of that is the brain is biased toward negative experiences because those are the ones that historically have had the greatest impact on survival. So the net of it is that whereas positive experiences have plain vanilla memory systems, so if you don't really savor them and relish them, they don't stay in awareness long enough to transfer from short-term memory buffers to long-term storage. That means that positive experiences tend to flow through the mind and the brain and like water through a sieve. But negative experiences are caught every time. 20 things happen a day, 200 things happen a day. Most of them are good, a lot of them are neutral, one is bad. What do you think about before you fall asleep? All right, it's the one negative event. That's why I say the brain is like Velcro for negative experiences, but Teflon for positive ones. The unfortunate result is that we register those negative experiences, but we don't build up the positive ones that are actually the basis of so many resources inside, including resilience. So let's do a quick little practice here. All right. There are basically 3 steps to deliberately internalizing a positive experience. So step 1 is the hardest, which is think of a good fact right now, any kind of a good fact, and then see what it's like to open up to an experience that's good based on that good fact. Not just an idea, but you're actually having here a mild, maybe subtle, positive experience related perhaps to something you're grateful for or glad about, or is a nice thing going for you these days. And then as you are aware of this good experience, now in the second step, really enjoy it. At the mechanical level of the brain, the more those neurons are firing, the longer they're firing, and the more intensely they're firing, the more structure you're building. So let's see what it's like to let yourself feel good for 10 seconds in a row.
Like we sit up here and...
Oh, I'm not done. We're into the third step.
What's that?
Now
He's
we're
not
in the
done.
third
He's not
step.
done.
Now
Okay,
that you're all
sorry.
feeling really good, you want to prime those
savor a little
memory
longer.
systems. Yeah, to really soak it in, like water into a sponge. You're sinking into the experience. It is sinking into you. All right? I do this with kids. I talk about the jewel going into the treasure chest of the heart. You might have a sense of, if you're visual like I am, like a golden, soothing balm coming down into you, maybe even touching or healing old places inside that are wounded and hurting. All right? But fundamentally, you're just doing something privately, 10, 20, 30 seconds in a row, but you're not leaving money on the table now. You're really tricking the brain so that it becomes like Velcro for the positive and Teflon for the negative. Half a dozen times a day, maybe even more times a day, even if you like, during a special time in the day, like just before sleep, when the brain is very, very receptive and sponge-like. This will gradually change things for the better over the time. And for me, it's a very important thing these days when we're surrounded by so many messages of doom and gloom and despair and all the rest, the meme all about of these dark times. All times are dark and all times are light. But if we don't rest our attention, that spotlight of attention, on the genuinely, factually, objectively based things that are good, we're going to be drawn into darkness. So this little practice of focusing on the good and letting yourself not be afraid is a political act, if you will, as well as a personal one. That would be my suggestion. Now, Fred.
You know, it's so funny. I was going to say that those of us sitting up here make mistakes. And I did it in vivo. But the point that I was going to make was, like, we sit up here and, semi-pretend to be experts. But this is a lifetime practice with a lot of stuff that gets in the way. And some of that is biological, and some of that is cultural, and some of that is the families we were raised in, so and then some of it is the people we partner with. But what I was hoping that, like, again, the panel would think about is, are they willing to share any struggle, obstacle that they faced in their own life to make it tangible and practical and human? Like, I'm just not like sitting up here as if I'm better than you. We're all in this. And, none of us have this wired, and, none of us fully understand it, PowerPoints, notwithstanding. So who, you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Who's willing to say, yeah, hey, here's something that I brought to the table that kind of cracked the table, and I had to figure something out. So that's my hope. So
I'd be happy to jump in with that. It is no secret, I think, that you can tell a lot about a psychologist by what they choose to study, because everyone's trying to fix themselves or their mother. Maybe that explains both. But I definitely have much stronger tendencies towards self-criticism than towards self-compassion, even though compassion for others feels quite natural. And when I was an undergraduate student, I was probably the most self-critical, perfectionistic, self-judging person you could imagine. And I am so grateful that when I got here to Stanford 12 years ago, that I came across a teacher a meditation teacher whose primary work is teaching self-compassion. And it was really through her demonstration of compassion to others and giving me these practices that I teach now that allowed me to have some sort of window into self-compassion. But those tendencies, as you mentioned, it's a work in progress. So I was real anxious last night about how this would go. And, I'm sure tonight I'll have a conversation with myself about how it went. And I'm really glad that I have practices to help with that.
For myself, when I was an undergrad, I found being an undergrad a really difficult experience. I was at Yale, which, like Stanford, was a very competitive place, and I was just stressed out all the time. And I was really trying to figure out a way to get help myself. And I tried going to this meditation group that they had there, and I was like one of two undergrads there, one of two like weirdos who'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and meditate, and I found it hard. And I actually did a program called the Yes Plus program, which is here also at Stanford, where I learned a lot about calming myself down with breathing and also doing service in the community. And I'd always wanted to make a difference. That was what I always wanted, because I was aware that there's so much to be grateful for, that I've been given so much. And yet I was stuck in this little stressed out world. And so when I learned that there are ways through the breath, through meditation, through yoga that I could calm down, I noticed that I was able to make so much more of an impact. And I love your analogy of the cup runneth over, because that's how I feel, and I feel like it's made a huge difference. And I feel like we all have this beautiful cup, and we're all this beautiful vessel. And that if we just dip right into that and just get rid of anything that's in our way, we can make this world such an amazing, amazing, beautiful place. So.
Oh, great. And thank you, Fred, for that. Definitely not a big softball down the middle of the plate, right? That was the real deal. Leave it to Fred to go real here. Thinking about what I could share out of the neurotic warehouse of my own mind, I thought I'd talk about anxiety. So I'm temperamentally mildly anxious, and lately I've been reflecting a lot about fear, because the last 10 years, obviously, have been kind of a teach-in about real tigers and paper ones. We evolved to feel alarmed 1,000 times over bogus threats in order to make sure that we track the real threats, and we never fail to see them. So we have a kind of inbred paper tiger paranoia, if you will, that's really the natural state in many ways in the brain. So for me, I've really started watching anxiety. Little needless anxiety, moment to moment. You can even notice it right now. Are you bracing a little bit more than you need to? We got to take care of real tigers, okay? But what about that kind of background, subtle sense of alarm, that's just in the body altogether by virtue of having an organism? Are we feeling like life is truly threat level orange, when actually, really, it's closer to threat level chartreuse, big bucket of green with a drop of yellow, So for me, again, a little bit as a political act, but certainly a personal one, I will deliberately engage practices of calming my body or helping myself appreciate I'm all right now. The future may be something to worry about. The past was what it was. But this moment, I'm basically all right now. Not perfect, but I'm okay. Basically all right now. Moment by moment by moment. And then, obviously, as I was saying previously, the more moments we clock in having the courage and the determination and the self-compassion to not live in fear needlessly, and to not feel bullied or cowed by those political forces that, as has occurred throughout history, love to use the human vulnerability to fear to gain or hold on to political power. Every time we do that, every time we, in our relationships, we realize that I don't need to feel so threatened by you, really. And I certainly don't need to do those little things that needlessly cause you to feel threatened by me. The more that we do that, the more that we weave, the more that we wire, self-confidence, strength, peacefulness into the fabric of our brain and our being. I'm tired of being afraid. Aren't you? Needlessly afraid. Okay, thanks.
One more question, and I'm going to start by just answering it myself. I have taught, my own, I'll just pose the question. I have taught forgiveness to people from almost any kind of hell one can imagine, in almost any part of the world one can imagine. From mothers who have had their children murdered to, families who had other family members killed at the World Trade Center to, now in Africa, just, endless misery. And I've done it, hundreds and hundreds of times. And what I'm going to ask, and I'm going to ask people to reflect upon, is I ask myself, why do I continue to do it? And there's a core answer for me that I'm hoping that these three will also answer, which is, I know that there's something about this that is my unique contribution to the world. And each one of us needs to find some unique pro-social contribution to this world to be happy. It's just that simple. We have to do something that helps somebody, that comes from our own unique, concatenation of skills and abilities and capacities and drives and everything. And again, I'll travel and I'll go to really wretched experiences, and what I hold on to for my own well-being is somehow I can do a tiny little piece to make the world more peaceful. And that I have a conviction that my words and my presence and my efforts can help people just be a tiny bit kinder. It's tiny. But that's what drives me. That's what's inside of me. That's my tiny piece, for this project of happiness, which is, it's mine. I can do a little bit of peacekeeping in my little sliver, and I just know people can be kinder. And so I was hoping that these three people would answer that for themselves. What's your core? And what gets you up in the morning when you don't want to, or you've said it 100 times? Because there's always something there in people who make a difference.
Okay. Well, gosh. A lot of things. One, I'm very interested in the brain, and, for me, my little bit of helping the world, steer away from the edge of the abyss, that it's kind of dancing on the edge of. I'm a rock climber, done a lot of climbing, and I'm used to being close to the edge, but we're really close to the edge, But we haven't fallen over yet. So I think one thing that I've gotten very interested in is using the new brain science so that even though we have a caveman, cavewoman brain, as it were, armed with nuclear weapons, we can gradually take more control over that brain and lead it to a better place. So that's what I've written about and so forth. But one thing in particular contained under that larger heading that I feel more and more moved by lately is helping myself appreciate, and in particular, helping other people appreciate that you're a good person. Right now, without needing a halo, you're a good person. And I think there are a lot of factors in the world that can make us doubt that we're fundamentally a good person. With basic grit, basic patience, basic fair play, basic wholeheartedness, basic willingness and interest in, learning and becoming a better person every day. You're a good person. I walk down the street, I see faces like, you look at my face, look at your face in the mirror, look at the faces on the street. Life is difficult, right? Scott Peck's opening line to The Road Less Traveled. And I find my heart more and more as I look at people and feel the suffering in their being. It's really, if I could communicate one thing from my heart, it would be, you are a good person.
Mm-hmm. I would echo that. I don't have much more interesting things to add to that. I think that's the core and the beauty of it. And so I have the fortune right now of working with returning veterans. They're very young, between maybe 25 and 27, and some of them come back so wretched, like, I shouldn't be allowed to be alive today for the things that I've done. They did things under the call of duty, and now they come back, they cannot live with themselves. And you hear so much about the suicides. And I just meet them, and I'm like, you're 24. And he's like, I feel like I'm 70. And, there's just so much darkness there. And it's so beautiful. And we're doing research at the University of Wisconsin using interventions based in yoga, breathing, meditation, to see if that can be of help. And our pilot data is very promising. And what happens is that they start to realize, oh, I'm not what I've done. There's something beautiful inside of me. And I think that's what you're saying. Everyone has this amazing, beautiful core within them. And just to be able to uncover that, I mean, if my life can contribute to uncovering that for just even one person, I'd be happy. So that's really what gets me up. And I also think that each one of us has the ability to bring that out in someone else, because when we see the beauty in someone else, we're allowing that beauty to come out in them. Have you ever had that when I was in work situations where there's one person that nobody really likes? But if you actually go and talk to that person and see that beauty in them, and then they notice, wow, they're noticing that beauty in me, it allows them to flower into that beauty too. So we all can be that instrument for everybody else too.
My first answer when you asked that question was just, what else is there to do? Seriously, what else is there to do? Something that hasn't been mentioned yet that I think definitely drives my behavior, if I'm honest, is that I do this work because it counters any tendencies I have to be withdrawing or to be judgmental or to be self-focused. And part of doing this work is encouraging myself to be that other version of myself that is more open and connected. And I think that, if I think about the core of the teaching and what the message is that I'd like to share with others, it's the idea that your body and your mind can be a safe place to be. A lot of the work that I do is with people who are in physical pain, or have some sort of illness, or suffering from anxiety and depression. And I want people to know that you can develop a kind of self-trust, that whatever happens, there's enough spaciousness and strength inside you to be present with that. And that nothing necessarily needs to be fixed or changed in order to find that peace and that strength. So that's the core.
Thank you. The thing what I think would be a nice way to finish is I'm going to ask everybody to do with me a moment or two of Buddhist loving kindness practice. Let's wish everybody be happy. So I'm going to lead it as just a very simple guided meditation practice, and then we're going to go to lunch. But I'd like everybody to sit comfortably in their chair. This won't take, this will be 3-4 minutes. And just quiet yourself down. And just take a breath or two into your belly as you were instructed, allowing it to rise as you inhale. And then just to gentle yourself, allow an image to come to your mind of someone you adore. Like just to quiet yourself into goodness and love, just allow an image to come front and center in your mind of someone you unstintingly adore. And picture them as delicious. And then feel that in your body. Feel the gift of love and connection, and just open yourself to trying to feel it. And then we're going to use that to just wish everybody well. So this is just a simple, the way I do this is just simple statements. I'm going to say out loud, may I be happy. I'm going to say it one more time, and then I want everybody out there to repeat it. May I be happy.
May I be happy.
May those I love and cherish, may they be happy.
May those I love and cherish, may they be happy.
May all that I have yet to meet, may they be happy.
May all that I have yet to meet, may they be happy.
May anyone that I have hurt, intentionally or unintentionally, may they be happy.
May anyone I may have hurt, intentionally or unintentionally, may they be happy.
And may anyone that has hurt me, whether intentionally or unintentionally, may they be happy.
May anyone who has hurt me, intentionally or unintentionally, may they be happy.
And may everyone, everywhere, be happy.
And may everyone, everywhere, be happy.
And now we're going to do it one more time as a whisper. I say it again, and you just whisper it quietly. May I be happy.
May I be happy.
May those I love and cherish, may they be happy.
May those I love and cherish, may they be happy.
May all that I have yet to meet, may they be happy.
May all that I have yet to meet, may they be happy.
May anyone that I have hurt, whether intentionally or unintentionally, may they be happy.
May anyone that I've hurt, whether intentionally or unintentionally,
and may anyone who has hurt me, whether intentionally or unintentionally, may they be happy.
And may everyone who has hurt me, intentionally or unintentionally, may they be happy.
And may everyone, everywhere, be happy.
Everyone, everywhere, be happy.
And then we're going to finish this by simply silently trying to feel it in your heart. No words, just feel it. May I be happy. May I know happiness. May I be blessed with being happy. Just feel that. Feel your desire for it. And then may everyone be happy. May everyone be blessed with happiness. May everyone's desire for happiness prove fruitful. May all be happy. And then just sit for a moment, making sure your breathing is still slow and regular, that the inhalation is filling your belly. And then allow your eyes to open. I thank you all.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
and we want your lunch experience to be happy. So if you please just give me a moment to share with you some ways to make it even happier. But first, this is Stephen Crane, who we all owe a deep debt of gratitude for pulling this conference together. Stephen is the TA for our course, and as I've been joking, is about 85% of my brain right here. So.
Yeah, sorry, just one quick logistic thing. We have a pair of sunglasses, pair of keys. If they're yours, come up and get them after we're done.
Do you want to tell people where lunch is?
Yeah, and can we put the slide up with the map? So yeah, lunch is over there and over there. And also note the lunchtime poster session is over in the lobby in that direction. So grab your lunch, do the practice Carol is going to tell you about, and check out some of the student posters over in the lobby.
Thank you. So some things to look for and some suggested things to do during lunch, other than eat and schmooze and talk and yak, is to talk about this idea of bringing in the good and savoring the good. We are incredibly blessed today. Today was supposed to be partly cloudy, and it isn't. It's sunny. Spend a moment in your 5 senses, in the here and now, in the present moment, and look at the millions of shades of green. Just slurp it up, people. It's an incredible day, February, California. But be in the moment. Take that time, at least once during the lunch hour, to look and experience what it is to be alive today, and to really understand that a lot of the time we hear information, we receive knowledge, and speaking for myself to our morning presenters, what I received was wisdom, deep wisdom, and that connecting point. You know, I was intellectually stimulated, but several times brought to tears by stories, particularly the personal ones. What a gift. I feel that. Thank you. Finally, this is a practice from a very famous Vietnamese monk, Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm sure many of you know him. And he does this practice and shares this when he finds himself or his mind moving into the past of worrying, and I should have, and I would have, and I could have, and didn't I register, blah, blah, blah. Future, worry, what's going to happen next. He just says, walk, and take each step as if your feet are kissing the ground. And there is nothing that will make you snap right into the present time more quickly than that. So I invite you to do that. Finally, our student groups who support this work and our partners, Be Well at Stanford, C-Care, Project for Compassion, Project Love, our peer health educators, other student groups, Stanford Peace of Mind, have spent a lot of time putting together poster sessions, and they're out there for you to see, as well as we have a number of students who have this campus project called Talk to Me About Anything. And this is one simple, beautiful thing. They just sit around with signs on the grass saying, talk to me about anything. And they don't do anything. Students come up to talk to them about anything. And part of this idea of being authentic and sharing the joy, but also sharing, hey, I need to vent and unload a little bit, is really a beautiful thing. And so go talk to them about anything. And please come back, enjoy your lunch. We'll be back here at 1:15. We'll be having a few more talks with a lot of interactive activities, and we'll see you. Actually, if I might ask you to be back here at 1:10 so we can get settled, and the program will begin right at 1:15. So go talk to somebody about anything, enjoy the lunches, the exhibits, and thank you very much.